Welcome to Annapolis Mosaics. Our program spotlights individuals in our community who are involved in activities designed to promote good human relations. I am Michael Keller, the chair of the Annapolis Human Relations Commission and your host. The commission is a city board that seeks to promote equal opportunity and to eliminate discrimination. My guest today is Christine Shea, who is the coordinator of the local chapter of Amnesty International. Chris, welcome to Annapolis Mosaics.
Thanks, Mike.
Well, could you give our viewers an overview of what Amnesty International is all about?
So Amnesty International is a worldwide grassroots human rights organization. The work of Amnesty International is based on the International Declaration of Human Rights, or the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which is a United Nations declaration. Amnesty's work sort of has two elements. First is focused on individuals. So there are individuals around the world whose human rights are violated. Amnesty hears about these people through various channels, does some research to be sure that this is actually a human rights violation as opposed to a criminal situation. And once this person is determined to be imprisoned for the peaceful exercise of their basic human rights, Amnesty alerts this worldwide network of volunteers, and then we kind of take it from there and advocate. The other element of Amnesty's work is to try to sort of work towards policies that protect human rights in general.
Amnesty has been around for more than 50 years. Could you share some of the highlights of the organization's history nationally? Some of the things that really sort of stand out in terms of that long tenure the organization has had.
Well, so Amnesty was started in 1961 by a British lawyer, Peter Benenson. And he read an article about two Portuguese students who were imprisoned for toasting to freedom, and was incensed, and wrote a letter in the Observer newspaper in England, just sort of prompting people to unite and work towards defending human rights. So from there, Amnesty has grown into this worldwide organization. There are sections in 70 countries around the world. There are millions and millions of people who work at various levels. I mean, from people like me who are pretty deeply involved to people who might just sign a petition here and there. Amnesty's moved, I would say, from being focused just on people, which is still huge to Amnesty, to looking more broadly at how, as a group, we can work towards building policies that make the world a better place for people to live in, where your human rights are respected by law, by policy.
Amnesty uses, I guess, what you could call a three-pronged approach for protecting human rights. And that includes research, mobilization, and advocacy. Could you talk and provide some detail about what that really means?
So, in the case where a person, for example, is arrested for, maybe I'll use an example of somebody that our group has worked on.
Okay, absolutely.
So our group worked years ago on a Soviet prisoner. His name was Mikhail Rivkin. And he was arrested because he had written an article advocating for democracy in the Soviet Union. This was in 1983. So through family members and associates, somebody contacts Amnesty International and says, this person's human rights have been violated. This is not fair. Amnesty then would research to make sure that Mikhail Rivkin is not a terrorist, is not a criminal, that he truly is in jail purely for the peaceful exercise of his right to freedom of expression. Then you kind of get to the mobilization piece. So that's the research piece.
Okay.
Mobilization would be sort of, okay, this guy needs our help. He's one of ours. So then, back in the 80s, letters would have gone out to various local groups saying, we need to help this guy. Today, it would be all via the internet, obviously. And then we as a group were asked to adopt him, which meant that we were going to become experts and we were going to become his advocates. Wasn't just us. There's usually 3 or 4 groups around the world. And then we worked for many years, writing letters to government officials, working with U.S. officials, advocating for his release. So there's the 3 pieces.
Yeah, and it's you're talking a lot about the efforts of the organization on behalf of what you could call human rights defenders, and that's what you've described in the case of Mikhail Rivkin, and of course many other individuals who have been caught up in the web of countries that don't respect human rights. But it's my understanding that Amnesty has developed as a priority campaign a focus on refugee and migrant rights as well, and has really raised it as a real major area of focus, sort of parallel to that of the individual defenders.
Exactly.
Could you, that issue right now is going to be in the forefront of people's minds, with the whole host of issues that are going on with the large numbers of migrants who try to come across the Mediterranean or come through areas of Europe on foot, or individuals who are fleeing violence in their countries, such as is occurring now in Syria. So that's an issue that's really going to be, I think, forefront in the people's minds, is because it's gotten so much news coverage. So can you tell our viewers about what Amnesty is doing in that area with respect to refugees and to migrants?
So you're right. I mean, Amnesty has 2 key priorities right now. One is human rights defenders, and the other is refugee and migrant rights. And so in terms of refugees and migrants, in Europe and the Middle East and Africa, the focus is first on individuals, again, individual people who are in trouble, but also on advocating with governments so that the policies of the governments are as supportive as possible of these refugees and their basic human rights, so that they are given asylum if need be, they are treated humanely, they are given a fair hearing, they are not sent back into a dangerous situation. So we've been, as a group, asked to write a lot of letters to government officials, both in Europe and in places like Syria, just sort of saying it's really important to us that these people be treated with respect. Also in the U.S., there are problems with asylum seekers, and so we also focus there.
Amnesty has several priority issues that it works on outside of the traditional human rights defenders and the migrant refugee rights. One long-standing area that Amnesty has had a focus on has been on opposition to the death penalty.
Yes. That was one of the core values of Amnesty from day one. Because by its nature, the death penalty deprives people of their basic human right. So again, with this sort of two-pronged approach between individuals and policies, we do write letters on behalf of people who are at risk of being put to death. We also advocate for policies that for death penalty abolition. So a few years ago, when that was a big issue here in Maryland, our group was very active with testifying, with meeting with our legislators, and eventually the death penalty in Maryland was abolished. It is still in some parts of our country. The death penalty is still in force, and so in those places we are writing letters. Around the world, places like China, the death penalty is still something that happens a lot. And so we write a lot of letters on that, but also Amnesty as a group will advocate against the death penalty.
We're going to take a break now, but when I return, I'm going to be talking with Christine about several other priority issues that Amnesty is working on, as well as getting some information about the local chapter. I'm talking today with Christine Shea, who is the coordinator of the local chapter of Amnesty International. Chris, another priority issue that Amnesty has worked on for a long time deals with torture. Can you tell us what they're doing here?
Well, again, both around the world and unfortunately in the United States, people are subjected to torture. We've written letters, for example, in the Guantanamo Bay situation. We've advocated vigorously for the closure of Guantanamo Bay if possible. Around the world, often the people that we are advocating on behalf of are victims of torture, because that is how authoritarian governments often deal with people that are not following their line. So in that case, again, we write letters. Amnesty's idea is that in all of these situations, it's a lot harder to do something terrible if people are watching.
Right.
And so by shining a light, Amnesty's symbol, as you know, is a candle encased in barbed wire.
Right.
So by shining a light, by having people in the United States write letters to Syria, for example, and say, hey, we heard this was happening in your prison. It just makes it a little harder to pursue those kinds of policies.
Amnesty's got some new, or at least newer, areas of focus. One is police accountability. What do you look at there?
Well, unfortunately, there has been an increase in violence by police against citizens. And so Amnesty is working to try to encourage departments and states and cities, municipalities, to put policies in place so that police officers, of course, need to do their jobs. But nobody wants a shooting. Nobody wants someone to be injured unnecessarily. So we work to advocate for policies that will enable policemen to do their jobs well, with citizens' rights being respected.
And Amnesty has also taken up the issue of gun violence, I believe.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes, we have. And so that, with the gun violence, Amnesty tries to be apolitical. Amnesty is not a partisan group, not a political group. I've written letters to Democratic presidents, to Republican presidents. It really doesn't matter. It's about what's happening. So in the case of gun violence, Amnesty advocates for policies and laws that will not take people's guns away, but that will allow people to be safe. And so again, it's community by community. Amnesty will do the research, and then we'll get a letter that will say, hey, can you write to this particular legislator and endorse a law that would, in Amnesty's judgment, make people safer.
And then I guess finally, in terms of issues, another newer one is a focus on women's rights, on LGBT people's rights, and on those in indigenous communities. What do you mean there?
Well, not so much here, luckily, but there are places in the world where being gay, lesbian, transgender is a crime. Where it is absolutely okay for you to be arrested and put in jail. So Amnesty will identify those individuals, and we will write letters on their behalf. Again, we will also, in our letters, ask for a change in the policy, pointing out every letter that we write, everything that Amnesty does, again, goes back to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which every nation in the United Nations, by virtue of being in that organization, they pledge to respect the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And the Universal Declaration of Human Rights guarantees freedom of expression, freedom of peaceful assembly, the right to education, the right to work opportunities, freedom of religion. There are probably others that I'm forgetting. But if you are a member of the United States, or of the United Nations, I'm sorry, you pledge to respect those rights. And being gay is not a crime. And the Universal Declaration of Human Rights sort of makes that clear. So countries are violating that by persecuting people.
Let's look now to the work of the local chapter. How long has the local chapter existed, and could you share some of the highlights of its history?
So we are, I will just brag a little bit, we are the longest, I'm pretty sure this is correct, we are the longest continuous running local group in Maryland. We've been in existence since 1983. I started actually at the very beginning of the group at a sort of introductory meeting at the public library in 1983. And so over the years, We've met at various places, but we've been meeting continuously every month, pretty much. One thing our group has done that has really been important in bonding is we've adopted prisoners. So Mikhail Rivkin would be an example. When we were working on Mikhail Rivkin's case, and we worked on his case for 6 or 7 years, we were writing letters every month. We were following up and seeing if there were any updates on his case. We were writing to the President of the United States, the Secretary of State, asking them to take his case up with their counterparts in the Soviet Union. We actually, in his case, his cousin lived in D.C. His cousin came and spoke with us, which made him much more of an individual. He did get released early. Andrei Sakharov actually worked on Mikhail Rivkin's case, and he was released early. We don't know whether that's because of our activities, but we think it helped. We had another interesting case when you were talking about indigenous rights. We had a case a number of years ago, a Mongolian man who was, in Mongolia, Inner Mongolia is part of China, but it is an autonomous region, technically. This man, his name was Tegashi, was part of a group that advocated for more autonomy for the people in Inner Mongolia. And he was arrested and charged with espionage and that kind of thing because of his activities with this group. But what Amnesty determined is that he was not doing anything illegal. He was just expressing his opinion that the people of that area were not being given the autonomy, the respect for their culture. In his case, we were able to make some contacts. There was a businessman in China at the time who was interested in human rights, and his name was John Hamm. And I believe, yeah. Anyway, he advocated for Tegashi's release. So did we spoke in front of. I testified in front of a congressional committee about his case, and between all of that, Tegashi also was released. He had a 10-year sentence. He was released after 7. 7 years in prison is a terrible thing for somebody who didn't commit a crime, but we hope that we were able to make things easier for him. In Tegashi's case, we were also able to write to him in prison. We don't know if he ever got those letters, but again, as a prison official, when some guy's getting a bunch of letters from the United States and other parts of the world, you got to think, who is this guy? You know, I think it just kind of, again, shines a light, gives pause to those who might be abusive.
And with respect to letter writing, the local chapter has had a long-standing project, which it's done each year, called the Write-a-thon, and I believe that continues. Could you tell our viewers about the Write-a-thon?
We still call it the Write-a-thon. Amnesty changed the name. Now they call it the Write for Rights.
Write-a-thon is a lot easier.
I know.
It's
but Write for Rights has that whole double meaning thing going on.
Yeah. Sometimes you got to win or don't change it.
Anyway, so Amnesty, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights was passed in 1948 on December 10th. So that is considered Human Rights Day. So around the world, Amnesty holds the Right for Rights, and they select 10 cases. And somewhere around December 10th, usually we do it on a weekend, we, along with groups around the world, write on these 10 cases. So these 10 cases are carefully selected. They're people who are either at great risk or who are sort of emblematic of a particular issue. And there are thousands of letters generated in a very short period on these particular cases. One thing that's kind of cool is that most of our letter writing is writing to government officials. But in the case of the Write-a-thon, we are also given addresses where we can write to the individuals. So we'll send them a little note, a little card, just saying, you're not forgotten. We know you're there. we're trying to help you. And so that's the Write-a-thon. And we do it every year around December 10th.
I'm sure that our viewers will be interested in learning more about the local chapter and how to get involved. What's the best way that they can contact you or the organization if they're interested in becoming a member?
Well, you can contact me directly. Do I say my email address?
Anything you want the public to know.
So my email address is cshea245@gmail.com, and you can contact me directly. We meet on the second Sunday of every month. Occasionally we won't, but I send an email out reminding people either that we are meeting or, in the cases that we're not, I'll let you know. We meet at 1 o'clock at the Unitarian Universalist Church. We meet in the Foz House Annex, which is on Lawrence Avenue, sort of behind the church. And a typical meeting, we're a small group. We might have 4 to 5 people, maybe as many as 10 on a really big day. I bring letter writing materials. I research some current issues, bring the case studies, bring the letter writing materials. We kind of chat about each case, and then we just sit together and write letters, so that at the end of a meeting, I carry away maybe 30 or more stamped letters, which I put in the mail. We often will try to we'll send copies to the ambassadors of our letters. One of our members commented, this woman's involved with a number of different groups, but she said, it's only after an Amnesty meeting that I walk away and I know I did something concrete. I wrote these letters. And so it is a very sort of concrete kind of a thing that we do. We also, as a group, for example, with the death penalty, when that was a big issue in Maryland, we did a lot of legislative advocacy. We met with the international, or the national group, I guess, and worked with them. We will occasionally do events with other groups, with, say, the Unitarians, or other groups on a particular issue. We've had death penalty things. We've had other events that were focused on a particular issue. But mostly, we write a lot of letters.
Okay. So thank you for viewing our program today, and please join us again on Annapolis Mosaics. If you would like more information about the Annapolis Human Relations Commission, jot down the information on your screen. You can reach us at 410-263-7998 or by email at hrcommission@annapolis.gov, or check out our page at the City of Annapolis website. Go to www.annapolis.gov, click on City Government, then Boards and Commissions, and scroll down to the Human Relations Commission page. And always remember the words of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who said, "We have flown the air like birds and swum the seas like fishes, but have yet to learn the simple act of walking the earth as brothers and sisters."